Namaskaram. Welcome to this program, Conversations with K. Muralikrishna or KMK. And this program has a specialty that introduces writers from various fields and personalities, accomplished personalities into with their conversations, no holds barred conversation. This is almost like an informal chat where the other person talks more and I listen and nudge him towards the desired answers. So today we have Sri Hale Kalyan. Actually, I can say Chiranjeevi Hale Kalyan because very young, and it is very heartening and surprising to see such a young man interested in such deep thoughts, especially in the contemporary society. So welcome, Mr. Hale Kalyan. And as is usual, the first question will be about your name.
Okay.
I think you understood without being asked.
Yeah. Always. Generally, so firstly, thanks for calling me on this Sunday, Muralikrishna, and I think I'm very, as I said, I was very surprised to get the invite from you because, as I told you, right, like I don't consider myself as a writer yet because maybe I'm more of an aspiring writer because I have not published anything as a physical book yet. But I've been engaging
writers and accomplished people.
Yeah. But I've been engaging on some of these topics for some time on the public spaces now, at least for the last 5-6 years more aggressively. So yeah, I can relate to, I think, like why you thought I'll add value to this discussion, because I do agree that like not many people are in my age group or in my peer group, they don't usually engage on these topics because as you said, like mostly people are chasing their own careers, their own like materialistic goals, and these things seem like off track, so they don't get as much attention. Maybe like barely a 5% of the pool is perhaps interested, at least in my kind of a pool, which is like, let me say, I mean, like elite white collar labor who are earning decent money in big companies and having a good career path. This kind of people usually don't move into this lane because they don't see money in it largely. And it feels like a hobby or an off-track activity, so they don't get in there.
In fact, when I first heard about you or read about your writing on Facebook and other platforms, I thought maybe it's a sham. Maybe you're throwing names and putting up a different facade outside. But as I got to know you, your writings, and maybe interacted with you a few times over phone and chatted with you, and read your writings and published in Sanchika, then I found that here is a genuine person who is way beyond his age. Actually, it's very, I'm very happy to interact with you now. And also, we don't have many platforms because anything that is anti-India, anti-Hindu Dharma, or that criticizes our society, culture, is gets more eyeballs, get more ears than
those are the platforms that exist. Particularly, I think at least what I have seen is in my own experience, because like I have been discussing some of these topics first in Telugu, only then I moved to English. I got more response or like more interest in English than in Telugu because I think in Telugu the platforms are a lot more dominated by the kind of ideologies that you mentioned.
Maybe we'll have another chat regarding Telugu platforms where you will ask me questions and I'll answer.
Definitely, yeah.
Because I've been senior in these Telugu platforms. Now,
correct. You are like a veteran.
We lost track of the original question. Your name.
Yeah, I'll come back to that. Yeah. So I think my name, right? So generally, whenever I introduce myself, I think that is the first question everybody comes up with. So Halley Kalyan is my, like I have two first names. Halley is there because I was named after the Halley comet. So I was born in 86. So I'm like 38, 39 now. My father was a chemistry professor. And then he thought he was more in that rationalist scientist kind of a bent at that time. So he put that name Halley. And then, so I come from a very like a traditional family, a lineage basically. And then they felt this was a break from the path that you cannot put a foreign name. So the Kalyan is my great grandfather's name. So they attach that saying it's a mix of, there's a bit of modernity and there's a bit of tradition. And very funnily, I think that is where like my journey is also moving towards that. I keep running into these situations where I'm questioning modernity and then I'm trying to understand tradition. So Halley Kalyan kind of captures my life journey also.
But did you face difficulty with the name Halley? Because even I thought you were a Christian in the beginning.
So usually like when people look at me also, I don't have the typical Telugu sort of a cut. So sometimes people ask me if I'm from Punjab if I am from somewhere else. And halley, the name, of course, confuses people. So yeah, I mean, it's always a good conversation starter. That's how I see it. People do get confused. That's why, like, particularly on the internet, on Twitter, especially, where I used to do some of these like political, ideological kind of posts. People used to think I am like a crypto Christian and all those things. So I had to update my bio to explicitly say I am a Hindu. Otherwise, it is very difficult for people to understand.
And what is this curious Hindu trying to understand Sanatana Dharma?
So I think that's again more because so if I look at my own background, right, I'm not trained. Let's say, for example, like I'm not trained in Sanskrit. I'm not trained in the traditional uh, scheme of education, right? Like pretty much everybody got into the modern scheme of education. So my education largely is all English medium. And then I went to IIIT Hyderabad, which is a very top tech school. Then I went to IIM Lucknow, which is again a business school. I've been working mostly in MNCs and US based companies. So that's all a very modern sort of a background. And in my day to day also, I think because I live in a urban sort of a place, it is not that there is a ongoing, it's not a religious community, right? Urban places are largely secular. So I look at myself as a modern person that way. And then my curiosity into Hinduism perhaps stemmed after somewhere around from my UG days when I started understanding the ways of the world. I started getting more and more questions, and pretty much in any dimension, any question I got, I ended up in Hindu Dharma. Like, let's say I'm wondering about ecological issues. I read up more on all the ecological, environmental issues. Then I again come back to Hindu Dharma. Then I read something about economics, then I come back here. I read something about materialism, consumerism, I come back here. So pretty much, I think in the last 10, 15 years, all my uh, reading and all my interactions, they have all been pointing me back towards my own tradition. So that is why I see myself as a curious or inquisitive Hindu because I'm trying to understand more and more. So as I peel the layers, I am understanding more and more of my own tradition. So that's how I see it.
And how was this your journey into this Hinduism, whether it is through your own understanding and investigations, or is somebody initiated into it, like through literature or through,
So
because
I
I
think it's
see Vishwanath Sacharana's
of
influence on
course
you. So is it
correct.
Vishwanath Sacharana that you led towards Hindu Dharma?
So I think that there are multiple factors, and like somebody like Vishwanatha Satarayana, for example, is a very big, like a huge influence, definitely, because I think I picked up Vishwanatha, like maybe I read Vai Padagalu when I was in my BTech, so in like maybe 1920, but I didn't understand the full impact of that book until maybe after I finished my MBA or somewhere in between, maybe like when I'm 25, 26. That's when I pretty much did one round of all of Vishwanatha's Gadya Sahityam, like all the novels. So that's definitely one factor. But broadly, if I look at the journey, right, I think there's a part of it is also like, yeah, there's also your lineage, right? Like my ancestors, and they've all also been deeply into literature. So, like you are in the Telugu space, obviously, right? So, Miku, you'll know about Vavilla Press. So,
Yes.
Vavilla is coming from a particular lineage of Brahmins. It's called Pudur Dravida Brahmins. So, I belong to that lineage,
Oh,
and most of my ancestors also have gone into largely into books. So Vedam is my mother's surname. So Vedam Venkatraya Shastri is also a very famous
yes.
scholar. So like that, I mean, in the whole lineage, there are so many of those who maybe in the early 20th century, they have been very popular
Yes.
from like 1850 to 1950 in the Telugu spaces. If you see, you'll see a lot of literary contributions by people from my own lineage. And then my father, he was also, although he started as a rationalist, like Janavignana Vedika sort of a person, over time in the 90s, let's say, when I was just growing up, that's when he moved into spirituality. He moved into the Himalaya yogi traditions, a bit of Sai Baba, and then the overall the broader Yogula Katalu sort of a tradition. So he was largely into the yogi and spirituality, Paramamsa Yogananda, that sort of a tradition. So I think that influence was also there, where I saw my own father transition from a like a hardcore scientific rationalist sort of a person to a spiritual kind of a person. And then in my own reading, even let's say when I was in my teens, I used to read up these books like The Wonder That Was India by A.L.
Okay.
Basham and such people. So there was that thing that it is not like our past was bad or we were hopeless people or that kind of a thing. There was always this yearning that maybe we were not as bad as how the mainstream is portraying us. Maybe there is something in our roots. So there was always that craving for roots. And then I think after I moved into my BTech is where a lot of my worldview sort of got formed. That is where, Triple IT, where I studied, had a lot of these professors who were involved with this person called Dharampalji. I think you mentioned at the start, right? So Dharampalji was essentially somebody who was a Gandhian at the start. And then over time, I think he studied a lot of these British archives and he came up with a picture of how India was just before British came based on their own archives. So I think the good thing that British did was that in their archives, they pretty much documented facts as they were. They didn't put too many opinions. So I think the picture that comes out of Dharampalji's overall work is that India was actually reasonably good both in science and technology, in terms of education, in terms of many aspects. So the professors in Triple IT Hyderabad, some of them were closely associated with Dharampalji, and one of my seniors also was close to those professors. So and I used to be close to him. So that's how it's that whole link kind of got connected. And Dharampalji actually visited the campus when I was there. This was in 2006. I think he passed away pretty much like around the same time. So I had the good fortune to have that like a face-to-face conversation with Dharampalji, and that influence was definitely there. And then I think I was also not happy with the overall economic model. So I used to read up a lot on globalization, economics, pretty much like all foreign authors. But then the kind of criticisms that they were doing, they were not able to, the solution space that they were getting into, it was not helping me. And that is where I think slowly I started getting into understanding somebody like Vishwanath Satyanarayana, who was trying to explain how our society was, what happened with the colonial encounter, what did colonial modernity actually do to us, what did we lose, and that kind of a thing. And then there is also the whole traditional influence. Like I started reading a lot of, I pretty much read every single letter that published by Swami Vivekananda. So I read all the collected works of Vivekananda. That kind of constructed something in my head. And then J.C. Kumarappa is one Gandhian economist. So he also tried to understand traditional Indian economic model, and he came up with some proposals. Then there was like E.F. Shoemaker. He is famous for this book called Small is Beautiful. So there were all these people who are also trying to come up with traditional economic models. So I used to read them and then understand if they all are saying this, then what is the Hindu perspective on this? And that is where I got more and more deeper into this discourse. And I also read a lot of the literature from the traditional matams, like Kanchi Paramacharya's discourse. So he's like Hindu Dharma. There is one a book by him which kind of gives an overview of everything. And then A Voice of God is another series where all his talks are accumulated. There were books by Sringeri Shankaracharya. There were books by the current Puri Shankaracharya, Swami Nishalananda Saraswati ji. Then there is Karpatri Swami, who is the guru of
Actually,
Nishalananda
I was
Saraswati.
about to ask, where did Karpatra Swami fit into it?
So this was all into that. I was trying to understand then what is our Dharma Guru's perspective on contemporary India. So mostly this is all, if you look at the names that I've quoted, these are all people in the 20th century who were seeing through what is happening to the country, starting from 1900 to maybe 2002 now. So they also have been publishing a lot of literature in terms of what does Dharma mean, what is the role of Dharma in law, what is the role of Dharma in designing constitution, what is the role of Dharma in economics, all of this. So I think all of this put together over time, I kind of constructed my worldview. So like you also spoke about A.K. Saranji, for example. So Ananda Kumaraswamy and A.K. Saran, they belong to one school which is called the Philosophy of Perennis or Traditionalism. These are also, again, a bunch of scholars, again, from the 20th century who try to understand what changed in our worldview with enlightenment, with modernity. Why did we become like this? Why is secularization happening? Why did secularism become such a commonplace thing? And what is the role of tradition? What is the role of a belief in something outside the Laukika, which is the transcendent? So all of this also was there. So these are all people, I think, who did not limit themselves to say religion is just about worshipping or doing a prayer in the house and left it there. They were actually trying to understand the role of tradition in practically every single sphere of human life, like commerce, law, economics, trade, everything. So they have a perspective on all of that. So I think that kind of helped me understand that Sanatana Dharma is not just about doing your specific sadhana or doing your specific puja ritual or maybe a festival here, a festival there. There is a lot more to Sanatana Dharma. And that is where I think the kind of discourse that, let's say, somebody like Swami Karpatri and all, they tried to do was essentially try to show the full expanse that this is what Sanatana Dharma overall means. Like, even if you take somebody like Kanchi Paramacharya, his works are not, you cannot bracket them and say this is only about a particular sphere of human life. It spans the entire human spectrum. So I think that's how I got pulled into all this. And every time it continues to happen even now. For example, just to make it more contemporary, right? There is this controversy going on where this beer biceps, there is a YouTube channel, one Ranbir Allabadia, there's a content creator. He got an award from Modi as well. He made a controversial comment in a comedy show about a very vulgar remark, and that created a lot of furor. So then I was discussing this with one of my friends in terms of how did the traditional content, or let's say you are writing something in the traditional mold, how are you censuring yourself, or how will you know what is right, what is wrong? So there was some references that was given in terms of in the Kavya Shastras, there is this whole notion of Kavya doshas, that a particular Kavya, it should not have XYZ doshas. So there are 10, 15 different types of doshas, and on each dosha, there is a lot of commentary given. In one of those doshas, there is somebody who is saying there's a particular kind of dosha called Ashlila. So in Telugu also we say Ashlila. Right? So this Kavya dosha has these characteristics. So if you do this, then you are violating this principle. There's so much of literature that we have in terms of how to criticize a Kavya and what are the Lakshana that a Kavya should have and all that. And then I wonder that we have so much in our own tradition, which kind of, it's essentially a guidance for the content creator. So if you try to if you try to look at it from a contemporary world, that is essentially how if you are a content creator creating content, then you need to be trained on something like that so that you will know what are your boundaries, what is right, what is wrong. So the fact that we have ended up today in this shape is because we have left all that. We are saying, I don't want any training. I decide what I want. I am the creator and I want to say whatever I want. And that is what led to this kind of structure. So I
So
think
there
even
are,
in these scenarios, I am able to see a relevance for tradition, that I would ideally look for something where somebody like an expert who can understand all these doshas and then sit with a content creator community and then explain to them that these are the guidelines, try to avoid this. So there's that whole layer also can be built with Indian traditions. So I think I find that fascinating.
but even I find the reaction to this episode that you quoted is a knee-jerk reaction, and it will
Correct,
die down soon, and then we'll be back to the same thing because
correct,
we have left our own shastras and have taken up with these kind of Western criticism principles clubbed with Marxian criticism
correct,
principles. So we
correct,
lost track of this Naitika Viluva in our
correct,
criticism. And if you apply these things to our Telugu language, the ancient Alankara Shastra to Telugu
correct,
literature that is coming up now, you will find not only 20 but more than 2000 doshas.
correct, correct. I
And
think there is
now
a struggle
another
that
question crops up while you are
mm,
speaking. You are hardly 38,
correct,
and initial part of your time must have been taken up with playing thing, doing etc. etc. It is after degree that you started serious reading. Now, in this short time, how did you cover so many things? And
it's a
did you
good
have to,
question.
and then
So
moreover you excelled in your academics also. So
Yeah,
how
I
was
think I managed to
how?
survive in academics. I didn't excel, but what I'd say is like maybe this was my only passion, largely like outside of my family life and outside of my professional life. This is my only passion. Like for example, somebody may be spending a lot of time watching IPL or a cricket match that may take 7 hours. In those 7 hours, I may end up reading a book. So I think for me personally, this has been the only thing that was keeping me occupied for the last 10, 15 years. So it was some kind of a informal study, but I think I don't think I did anything else. This was my only focus area. So I did have enough time. And thankfully, I think my professional career also, it didn't have like as much demand as someone else. I know people who are like working 15 hours and working on Saturdays and Sundays, no vacations. So I was not, thankfully, my job didn't demand as much from it. It does demand some time, but I'm able to manage my passions along with it.
And no complaints from near and dear?
That is there always. Like even today, as I am having this conversation, I am not with my near and dear. So I think these things keep happening, but I think at some point they will also. So I like at least in the last 4 5 years, I think I've given a lot of these talks and sometimes I'll have to travel somewhere to attend a workshop or to have some closed room meetings and all that. So it does keep coming into the conversation. Why are you doing all this? Why are you every Sunday, every Saturday, you come up with some activity like this? But then I think that's a part of life. I think if without this, it is very difficult for me just to be a regular job goer. Like pretty much my fuel to what fills me with excitement is activities like this. So I think that's a compromise that thankfully my family has understood that I'm really passionate about all this. So.
And now I'll ask you one question which you can refuse to answer. Like you are doing what you like to do, but you find
Mhm.
so many senseless people in the
Mhm.
guise of rationalism or modern thought or progressive thought, talking rubbish and arguing. So, how do
Correct.
you feel about this?
Yeah, so I think my what I particularly have a problem with is maybe it's also a complaint on people like myself. I know a lot of people who know more than me on some of these matters, but they all choose to stay silent. So my problem really is that the we are leaving this space empty, and in that emptiness, it is getting filled with all of these voices that you just mentioned. So we cannot complain that why are these people making noise. You need to also take a chair on that table and then put across your point. So my problem really is that, particularly, I think I have this complaint more on the Telugu literature because like we talked about Vishwanath Satanana, right? So he did so much in his lifetime, and then after that is when the like from 70s onwards is when maybe the leftist sort of discourse had a upswing. And then from then to now, if you see that there were not enough as many voices which have pushed the voice of tradition overall. So I think that is also because more people have gotten into their careers and their jobs, and maybe they also felt Manakendukivarni, like which is that let's not get
English,
into all
English.
this. So they felt, let's not get into all this. Why argue with these people? Let them say whatever they want. I don't want to get into it. So I think that is a bigger problem for us, is what I feel. Where I keep going to the book fair every year, pretty much, just to see the kind of books that are getting published every new year afresh. I think there are like so many books that are getting published on, let's say, people who were very reformist or were very anti-tradition and that kind of a thing, but we don't have as many books that are getting published which are pro tradition, or essentially, broadly speaking, books that don't fill you with hate, guilt, and shame about your own tradition. So if you take somebody like Dharampalji, for example, right, he did so much work, but his works are not there in Telugu,
Yes.
barring one or two like brief translations here and there. There's barely any work of Dharampalji in Telugu. So I think like that there are gaps. So like even Anand Kumaraswamy, for example, his works are not there in Telugu. Some old like articles, one or two here and there are there, but there is nothing that is available which is you can consider as authentic as a translation. But you can find the translation of some obscure Russian author
Yes.
published some 2 3 times also. So I think that is the gap. So that is what bothers me more. I'm not very worried that let's say some atheist, rationalist, Marxist, or broadly Nastika voices are dominating the space. My worry is that Astika voices are not speaking up. So I think that is my worry. So I think that's where I like the kind of work that you are doing, right? For example, the Rajatarangini series of works that you are publishing, that doesn't even exist. And without that, if you talk, you'll get into this, oh, you are Hindutwa and all of that, right? But then if you show all that literature saying, forget Hindutva, forget 19th century, forget 18th century, go back to 11th, 12th, 13th century, you'll see the same conflicts play out. And you see how the traditional society responded, and all of these questions are there even then. So this fact that today people are looking at these questions and then trying to bucket you into, oh, you are BJP or RSS or something. That's it's a very sad game that these people are playing just to politicize the conversation. But I think these kind of fundamental questions are there in our society from a long, long time. We'll always keep seeing those voices. But as I said, my worry is that that kind of publishing or that kind of activity is not happening now from the traditional standpoint. We are ceding that space because we are not occupying those spaces enough. It's getting flooded with these other voices.
Maybe we have already seeded those places and we have to
Correct.
reclaim them.
Correct, correct. Like
And
publishers, for example, right? I think publishing is a good space there. Like we don't have the kind of publishing which even we had in 1950s, 1930s, where so much of traditional pro-tradition voices were there. So many magazines, so many books, so many publishing houses were there. Today we have all these publication houses which are openly Marxist. I mean, that is the space that is that's the kind of people who are dominating our discourse today.
and do you believe this Hindutva is bad? Like Hindutva is violent?
So I think the way I'd see it is that Hindutva is perhaps the answer to secular politics. So we have been secularized maybe from 50s so much that we have been like brainwashed that religion should have nothing to do with polity by and large. And then when you look at how it played out, the whole politics was again around religion only, except that they were uh, essentially focused on reforming or shaming the majority religion and appeasing the minority religion. So I think this whole rise of Hindutva, the way I see it, is maybe like a good chunk of people were fed up with this whole thing. And whatever happened from, let's say, 90s onwards is a reaction to this
Reaction.
whole phenomenon.
Mm.
So, and then like these comments on violence and all that, I think that's very selective. Like that is being made like I think 2 3 weeks back we had the judgment come out on the Sikh riots, where some one or two people were named by the court. So the Sikh riots happened in '84, but does anybody call Congress violent? They don't, because I think it's all about how it is portrayed and how the whole discourse is run. Particularly, I think the challenge is Hindutva alone gets this whole violent sort of image is because of what happened in 1990 and what happened in 2002. There's a very selective point in time. They take one or two of those events and then try to drive the entire narrative around that. But I think like if you look at the broad Hindu space, it has not been like that. So it was not only about that. There's a lot of ideological movements that have happened. There was a lot of thinking that has happened. There is a lot of writing that has happened. There is so much more. So we should not look at one isolated incident and then say that is a representative of the way things are run. And that incident itself also is a manifestation of how things ran in the like 40, 50 years before that. So it's like a tipping point. It is not because that is how things were all the time.
But you said that we are secularized after 1950. Does it mean
Correct.
that before that we were not secular, or what does secularism actually mean to us, to
So
Bharatiya
I
Hindus?
think when I said secularized, that's more in terms of how the constitution and how the Nehruvian model kind of operated. Before that, also, I don't think we were. It's not correct to say we were not secularized, but
Yes.
we were not a formal and secular constitution. We were
That
still
hmm.
colonized.
We
So I
did not
think
know
there,
that what we are following is secularism, but we followed it.
correct. But I think something more changed.
Yes.
Like at least like if you look at the way, let's say temples and matams were managed before 1950, a lot of people say that they had more independence than now,
Yes.
because the state and bureaucrat structure, the way it has been constructed post 1950, I think they took a lot more control into their hands, which was not the case before. Even in the like some of the cases where you have like a Islam king or even like a colonial sort of a ruler ruling, they gave a lot more independence to some of the Hindu institutions then than now. Even in terms of law, for example, the kind of changes that Hindu Code Bill brought about was not something that even the colonial era administrators could have thought of. So I think the way the whole thing ran post 1950 is very different. In like education institutions, also, if you take, for example, right, the people had much more independence on their curriculum before than now, because now you have to follow everything that comes from top down in a particular construct. There's a curriculum design. There is you have to only teach this. You cannot teach that. And then there is this thing that Hindu educational institution will not have a certain right, but a minority education institution will have a right, because that's how the articles are constructed. They have a lot more independence in terms of what they can teach, how they can manage their affairs, so on. So I think this kind of a secularization really is a post 1950 model. But prior to that, it's like also we have been like that. So I think it's like a journey where post 1950 it kind of like rallied in full throttle. That is how I'd see it. And in terms of like my own definition of like my own understanding of secularism, I think the way this has happened in our case is secularism is basically a cover for making more and more people Nastikas. I think that is how things have happened in this country overall. While it was supposed to mean you are equidistant from all religions and the state and religion are separate, it didn't mean that, because the state took over control of all the temples, the state took over control of all the education institutions, and the state dictated what is good for the public sphere and what is not. So over time, what has happened is, I think the uh, average Hindu who comes out of these systems, he ended up becoming like a skeptic or a spiritual but not religious kind of person, or somebody who thinks all of his traditions need reform, and that kind of a thing. So I think over time, I feel this has done a lot more damage to us than even what Britishers have done. So let's say in the 1900 to 1950, if you look at the kind of literature that we produced, or even the autobiographies that were produced, if you take Sripada Subramanya Shastri's autobiography, his own upbringing and education is now impossible for somebody like me to even dream in this era, because we have just secularized ourselves so much. So even when the Britisher was there, we didn't even secularize ourselves so much. So I think the whole modernization, secularization thing that got kicked off in starting 50s, and which changed dramatically after 90s with more and more of the Western capitalism kind of models coming in, I think that did a lot more damage to us as practicing Hindus. So I feel like overall Hindus are weaker now, even in terms of their own traditional education, than they were before. Like people used to, they could tell the padyams or poems from various shatakams from Mahabharata, Bhagavata, all that in their tongue tip. People were trained, although they were maybe doing other Laukika professions, they were still trained in all that. But now, like we don't even have those structures anymore, right? I mean, there's nobody to pass on that education. I myself am not trained on that. So what will I pass on to
Next
my next
generation.
generation? So I think we have seen what we are seeing now is pretty much like three generations of post 1950 educated people, like grandparents, parents, and children. And from, I think that shows, like if you give Vishwanath Satyanarayana's book now, there are so many Telugu people of my age and below who cannot even read. They say this is a Telugu that I cannot relate to. So we have lost our language also. So I think that kind of a model didn't happen before. So even though, let's say, the British were ruling, or like Vishwanatha Satyanarayana says in Brohitumida, even though the Nizam was ruling, people didn't lose Telugu. So now, in a independent era where we are supposed to have freedom, we have lost more of our language now. So barely anybody is reading Telugu now. People of my age and below. I don't even see people talking about Telugu books, when, like in my peer groups, book reading means by default it is English. Nobody even refers to Telugu. So I think that kind of a transition is a lot more because of like larger constructs that have operated. That didn't happen before. So
But
I think that's a bigger transition.
you are into our Indian Dharma philosophy, reading about
Mm.
it, and considering all these things, do you think that religion can be separated from Indian way of life? It is an integral part, I believe. You cannot separate religion from Indian way of life. But do you think that at any time in future, can religion be taken out of a Hindu or a Bharatiya?
I think that idea is now pretty much weakening, because, as I said, right, I feel lot more and more people are fed up now with this idea that take out religion from X sphere, Y sphere, Z sphere. So more and more of discourse is happening where I want to bring back the role of Dharma into all of these other areas. And I think that's broadly the global trend also. Like if you look at this whole Western woke culture that kind of picked up in the last 5-10 years, there a lot of scholarship now has come up where conservatives are coming back there and saying that this idea that the public square can be neutral is a sham. So they are saying public square should be Christian again. Public morality should be Christian morality, because if you say it is not Christian morality, secular morality is becoming woke morality, because that's how the whole ideology is operating. They'll say that I'll be equidistant from all religions, so each religion gives away its territory, and then they fill that with their ideology. So I think people have understood this now. So I mean, at least slowly people are understanding it. So I don't think moving forward, at least my hope is that we don't do this whole secularism mistake once again. We will start trying to engage more and more with how to increase the dharmic quotient in all these areas where we have secularized.
Because
So I think that's how I see it.
in our lifestyle, we get up, then do namaskara to the God before stepping on the floor. Bhudevi
Correct.
namaskaram. Then
Correct.
we do exercise, Surya namaskaram.
Correct.
So this religion, so-called religion, is also a part of our daily life from waking up to sleeping, even in dreams, are connected again with our religion. So
Correct.
I think by separating religion or so-called religion from our daily life, I think we lost a lot.
Correct.
In fact,
I think my understanding is the bigger issue is the world of work has been detached from religion.
yes,
So previously, like if you are even like let's say you are a goldsmith, if you look at the traditional goldsmiths work area, you'll feel like that is also a kind of temple. There is so much of
yes,
religious background there. And if you take somebody like a potter, in that whole potter's tradition, the art of that creating an object of clay from a wheel, they are able to see the whole macrocosm of
full
creation repeated it, like
creation,
they see
yes.
Brahma in it and all of that. So we were able to sacralize pretty much every single area of work before, like in a weaver's work also, in that weaving part in their own songs, you will see that they were able to see the whole drama of creation playing out in that art form. So I think that's how where like you said, everything was actually religion. Even weaving was religion, pottery was religion, and every
Birth,
single act
birth
that
of a
you,
child is religion. His
everything
growing up
correct.
at every stage is religion.
Correct, correct.
Religion
But
is
now I think
intertwined.
what has happened is with more and more of the modern jobs taking over our lives, we have kind of like we have desacralized work. Work was sacred before. Now we have desacralized work. So the challenge is now that for a typical modern day person, religion has become like a very small part of his life. And when you're inside, let's say, a company, that's a very secular space, and their religion doesn't have much of a game. But there also, I think the interesting part is if you look at, even if you go to a big IT office, which is maybe like a US company or a Europe company, you go deep inside, there'll be some server rooms or somewhere. Near those server rooms, you'll again find somebody putting paspu, kukuma, all that, because somewhere that person again is a Hindu. So for him, he'll come back and say, this part needs to be protected. This is important for the company. So like that, when they inaugurate something, they may again use a coconut. So again, those things keep happening because I think people cannot be 100% detached from their religion. So in fact, there are people who in their desks, in their cubicles, you'll again find some small god's photo kept in or some yogi's photo kept in. And there is somebody like the other day, uh, 1 week back, one of my colleagues went to Kumbh Mela. He bought prasadam and he gave to all of us. So I think even though the attempt is to create a clean, non-religious space, the fact that because people cannot be 100% secular, people have that religion inside them
Yes.
all the time, it comes out. But the challenge, I think, is the domain of work is still very uh, secular. So that domain of work, how do we sacralize work? I think is a bigger challenge for people who want to like understand the core of this problem. Like a lot of the work we do today, and some of the kind of professions as a whole, I don't think they are like they don't have any sacred anchor at all in them. So I think that is a bigger issue. Like people getting into let's say, for example, in the traditional, you have a list of vyasanams where people say vices, this should be avoided. So if you look at some of the things that the modern day trading platforms are doing, that is practically what
Yes.
it is Judaism only, which is basically gambling. But then let's say you are spending day in and day out in a trading platform, that will affect you over time. So you cannot be religious and then say, I'll do that as a profession
That's
because
why in
your
India,
mindset changes.
that's why in India, a thief before going for robbing someone, he prays to God to give him success.
Correct.
And now, as we are talking, another question cropped up. You can see the division distinctly drawn, all territories marked about caste.
Correct.
But just now, while we were talking, we agreed upon a thing that earlier, whatever may be the caste, everybody is directly connected to the cosmic God, and
Correct.
everybody felt he is the creator, and he had his own confidence and a kind of self-respect, high self-respect in the society, irrespective of his status in society.
Correct.
Now, how do you compare this? with the current day philosophers or sociologists saying that people left Hindu Dharma for greener pastures because of caste.
Correct. I think like anybody who wants to engage with Hinduism, they cannot avoid the question of caste. It will come back to you in some form or the other all the time. So I think like my own understanding or my own awareness on this, uh, like maybe I can start with some of the whole analysis that somebody like Anand Kumaraswamy has done, right? Because he was somebody who was in that 1900 to 1950 kind of an era, and he was studying the transition of India getting colonized and then moving to the industrial era. So he cites a particular anthropologist or sociologist called A.M. Hokar. And Hokar makes this remark that hereditary service has been painted in such dark colors only because it is incompatible with industrial civilization. So their point is that if you study all the pre-industrial societies, practically everybody was a hereditary profession there. So if you look at like we use Bata as a brand here in India, Bata is a very popular brand
Brand.
for slippers and footwear in general. And if you open their website and study their own history, they proudly say that they are 14th generation shoemakers from Czechoslovakia, somewhere in Europe. So even in Europe, they had hereditary professions. Everybody had it. So it is not like something unique was there with Hinduism, which forced people to do hereditary professions and all of that. My reading is that in pre-industrial era, that is how the world operated, because that is what so much mobility was not there, so many different technologies were not there, and so much communication was not there. Pretty much people stayed in one area for a long, long time. So if you are like the Bata family says, there are some 14th generation of shoemakers because those that lineage of shoemakers were there in that place. So you would find this in Europe, you'll find this in China, you'll find it in Japan, and in so many places. So I think what happened in our case is that um, some of these castes or jatis, they lost that kulavritti sort of a model or a livelihood guarantee sort of a model because of this technology disruption. And then because we were also colonized at the same time, the society could not respond in any way because it was not like you lost your kulavritti, I can give you something else. Nobody was there in that position to perform that job. So colonial disruption was really that is it disrupted all those livelihoods, and then it left people to fend for themselves. So whatever little jobs were available, some castes might have gotten a headway into maybe some kind of government jobs or something like that, and that caused some heartburn. And from there onwards, things were on a downward slide. That is how I'd see, I think, our caste trajectory. And in the modern days, I think it is still not clear how everybody can find what they want to do. Like there is this whole American dream kind of a narrative that you can be whatever you want to be. Everybody can have upward social mobility. That you can even like if you are born into some family, you can rise up and become something else. But that sort of a prosperity also, it is not like people are able to see everywhere. It is not like even today, nobody is forcing you to do your hereditary profession. But it is not like everybody is flourishing. Even now there is inequality. Even now somebody will become a billionaire, somebody will not be able to get a job. So that I think the transition has been from a livelihood guarantee kind of a model to a model where everybody has to like find out their own livelihoods. So it's not a smooth transition. I think the current setup that we are in, the insecurity levels are actually much more higher. Like nobody can tell whether this particular job will survive in the next decade. It technology may change, it may get disrupted. Like I remember when I was a child, my mother was learning shorthand, typewriting, that kind of a thing. Those skills don't exist anymore. Typewriters have been they vanished. This shorthand as a skill also is now gone. Nobody even wants it. So these kind of skills they keep coming and going all the time now. And with this whole new technology like artificial intelligence and all this coming in, even the white collar label, they themselves don't know whether their jobs will stay. So if you ask me whether my current profession will survive 15 years or 10 years, I don't know. So we are living in area like era of deep livelihood insecurity. That era, good or bad, it had livelihood security. What it didn't have was mobility. So maybe if you are the son of a weaver, 90% of the time or 95% of the time, perhaps you are still a weaver. And you may not be, maybe you didn't have the ability to become something else. But broadly, that was the case with every single line. So if you look at 100 professions in the society, broadly everything was hereditary then. So it was not like because you are a weaver, somebody was trying to do something to you. That is, hereditary profession was the kind of broad model in which everybody operated. So I think that's how I see the caste question. The disruption is more because of the industrial era, and pre-industrial era, every other society had this. So it was not. It is. I don't think it is something like for which we should uniquely feel guilty about. So I think that's how I see it.
But the politics of Mahatma Gandhi, he held upper caste responsible, and he wanted
Correct.
to feel upper caste responsible for the kind of discrimination that exists in society, and he wanted upper caste to correct themselves. So, do
Correct.
you think the guilt feeling of upper caste stems from this, or is it
So
something else?
yeah, so there's a lot of politics around this, definitely, and I think so. Like one of the professors in Hyderabad, whose work I admire a lot, is Professor D. Venkatrao in the FLU University. So he has done a lot of work in this area of critical humanities, jatis as cultural memory, and that kind of a broad space. I think he used one word which kind of stuck with me when I heard it in one of his talks. So he says that there is a lot of unexamined guilt with this topic of jati and
Right.
caste. So we don't even examine that guilt. It's just passed on. So that guilt is passed on by politics and by education and all of that. Automatically, people have like assumed that kind of a guilt. And I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done to first examine that guilt and then also like bust those claims. So I think, but I don't think there's enough that has been done even in the Telugu spaces around that, because broadly it has been politicized with the Marxist lens, with the oppressor oppressed kind of lens, or like you said, upper caste should be guilty kind of a lens. So I think we need to maybe shift that gaze a bit or understand what exactly has happened and things like that. So, for example, even if you like, when I was doing my own kind of reading on this, right, I found one of the websites that back then, maybe this was 7, 8 years ago. It was a website that was maintained on the name of Mandakrishna Madiga Garu. His website, he had some pages where he quoted some foreign scholars, where he actually agreed that the Madigas were quite rich back then because they had a monopoly on leather. So he said leather, they used to own the leather industry in that particular region, and they were quite rich and they were quite well to do. That is how they were able to finance so many upakulams, as like for the Kulapuranams and all of that, right? Madigas have up to 5 to 6 different upakulams tagged to them. So there are scholars even to this day who ask that question, that if at all that was a totally economically deprived jati, how come it was able to fund and finance 5 other families who are dependent on their own jati? So I think now there are some people who are asking these questions. But what we should not deny also is that that economic disenfranchisement happened. So leather, let's say they charmers in the north, for example, they also had a monopoly on leather. So many instruments for the day to day in the village, for equipment, for agricultural activities, they were all leather based, and there was an economic transaction that was there. That got disrupted, and then that whole poverty and all of that did happen. So I think that part there is no denying that there was indeed a disruption for to livelihoods, to economy, all of that that happened. But we should not exclusively look at this as a oppressor oppressed sort of a lens. That is how I feel. Like each of these groups had their own assured livelihoods, and they had their own way of life. They had their own flexibilities to create their own jatis also. A lot of these jatis or kulams, it was not like they had a Brahmin a priest tagged to them also. Their temples also not necessarily, nobody was saying that your temple should be this temple and it should be only done by this Brahmin priest and all that. If you look at the diversity, there were priest paramparas in different other jatis also. They had their own archakas, they had their own Kula Purana narrators, they had their own festivals. A lot of diversity was also there. I think the whole disruption that happened with livelihood and colonial modernity. A lot of these jatis have also died down. These Kula Puranams have died down. These temples have died down. So I think it's a massive disruption that happened. Because of that, I think that is why the politics in the contemporary times is so hot now, because like I've taken away your if I portray myself as like modernity, right? So industrial modernity, I've taken away your jobs and I left you saying you figure out whatever you want, and nobody is helping you because everybody is running their own struggle. Nobody is in a position to say I can take care of you, because everybody is doing that individualized kind of a journey that people want to focus on them at best, their own community or their own family. Beyond that, nobody has the wherewithal to do anything. And state has given up. State is also saying, I'm not managing economy. Economy is managed by individuals and capitalists. So it's all for you to figure out. So I think that model is a very cruel model, because it is leaving individuals to find out their own fortunes, and it is not giving them any support system. So I think that's where there's a lot of challenge for us today.
So keeping this in back of the mind, how do you see the future?
So I think my personal view is in terms of how the future will pan out. This whole technology disruption, I think, is something on which the traditional minds or religious people in general need to study a lot more, in terms of the whole how is technology as a overall trajectory moving, what can it do to humanity, and what are the implications to human life, to livelihoods. I think we need much more of thinking that needs to happen there, because I see that as the single biggest force that is going to disrupt us, continue to disrupt us once again. Just like, so if you look at our overall history, right, even if you go with the Indologist kind of a narrative, they put maybe 3000 BC or 1500 BC, somewhere they start. So even if you look at our 4000, 5000 years of history, I think this disruption that happened with 18th century industrial colonial modernity is unprecedented. Nothing like this happened before. We have seen Islamic invasion. We have seen the internal tussles between, let's say, Buddhism and rest of Hinduism. We have seen a lot of these things, lot of internal reform movements in 15th century, 14th century, but nothing could shake this society the way the industrial revolution shook us up, because that is the one that disrupted this whole, let's say, Varnashrama Dharma sort of a foundational framework that was there, which used to assure livelihoods for people. And why did that disruption happen? It is because essentially the technology stack changed. The way the technology with which people were operating up until 16th, 17th century, that technology totally changed. It got disrupted starting 18th century onwards. And I think that sort of a disruption is now, many are saying, people are saying that it is happening now with maybe things like artificial intelligence and so on. So I think we need to study that model to like construct this picture of future. So if we want to imagine a kind of a dharmic future, we also need to have like a philosophy of technology and those kind of stance. Otherwise, what is going to happen is like, again, some technology will come, it's going to disrupt livelihoods, again it is going to come change our lifestyles, or in fact these days we also have the challenge of sovereignty, right? Like most of the technology that we use today is not even our countries. We are either dependent on US, we are dependent on China, or any of these places. So uh, that whole technology space, we have just left it saying we'll not do any thinking, we'll just follow. I think that I see as a bigger challenge. We have to figure out that whole space, and then we have to tame it, and we have to make it work as per overall broader dharmic kind of framework. Like if you look at the contemporary discourse on technology in the US or in the West in general, a lot of people are trying to defeat death now, because for them they have achieved some level of abundance or prosperity. In fact, I think 2 weeks ago there was this billionaire who came to Mumbai, and he complained about the that pollution and air quality index, and then he left one of these interviews midway. And that billionaire, his whole there was a Netflix documentary also on him. His whole thesis is he's trying to extend life beyond like the traditional 80, 90 year or 100 years. So he's doing a lot of investing in a lot of these companies, doing a lot of biological, chemical inputs, trying to defeat death, trying to defeat aging. Basically, he wants to stay young forever. It is the kind of things that somebody like Yayati in Mahabharata, is that those sort of quests. So our tradition said those quests are fruitless and you should not indulge in those. But now with technology, people are actually indulging in those quests, thinking that is the future. So there are people who are trying to extend age, and Silicon Valley is saying, I'll try to produce children. They're trying to do lab babies, all sort of things, right? So I think those are the spaces where there is practically they are trying to do anything and everything. They don't that whole dharmic layer, which is telling you what is right, what is wrong, that has practically vanished from the technology spaces. And I think that is what will dictate how our future is going to shape up. I think that's where my like interest more is that like if you go back to the early part of the conversation, right? One of the reasons why I got into this space is also because I did a lot of reading on this philosophy of technology as a topic. So there are a lot of Western scholars. Like if you look at philosophy of technology in Google, you'll find courses on it, university courses, published books on it. So there are a lot of Western scholars also who have studied this change in trajectory, that starting industrial revolution, the nature of technology kind of changed. The technology that we used to operate with before and the technology we used to operate with now is very different. And how is that affecting society? So technology and society, there's a lot of that also literature that is available. So I think that is the space where I have a lot of interest, and that is where I think Dharma has a game to play. Like by leaving this whole technology space, saying let it be secular, I won't add Dharma into it, and I won't put a dharmic layer into it. We are letting anything and everything to happen there, and I don't think it's going to be a like a rosy future. The future is going to have more and more disruption and more and more gloom, in my view, if we leave it without a sacred anchor. Because, as you said, right? I mean, in our conception, religion is not limited to one particular compartment. It is not about just your puja room or a temple visit. Your entire life is dictated by so much of a religion or a sacred anchor. And by leaving such a powerful force as technology without a sacred anchor, it is going to disrupt life. It's not going to be like a more positive or a more progressive picture. I think it will be more regress. So I don't have a very positive view in terms of how the future will pan out if we leave it without a sacred anchor.
And actually, I see that you are a bit tiring. I wanted to conclude, but your conversation, you brought up something which really piqued my curiosity. What is your take on Buddhism? These days, everybody says Buddhism is ancient, or and it predates Vedas and Hindu
Correct.
Dharma. So, how do
Correct.
you feel as a person who is a curious Hindu and trying to understand Sanatana Dharma? How do you see this development?
So yeah, I think Buddhism also, there's a lot of maybe what we should say is knowledge politics around it. It is used for various purposes for various people. For like some people see some kind of a like egalitarian, equality, casteless sort of a model in Buddhism. But if you study Buddhist societies in those eras, there you won't find any trace, because it's only the monkly order or the sannyasis who had maybe some semblance of equality. But even there, they had gradations, that they had hierarchy of acharyas within their Buddhist monkly orders. And the Buddhist society practically was very similar to a traditional Hindu Varnashrama Dharma society. You have, in fact, Buddhist kings who have gone to, like, if you study the kingdoms of Cambodia and the whole East Asia, there are, in fact, kings who have written books which are almost like a copy paste of Manusmriti and given it a Buddhist name in Cambodia or Laos and Vietnam, that sort of places. Because in the Buddhist philosophy, there is not too much of a discussion on householder duties. Like a grihastha, a regular grihastha samaj, there is very little commentary. It's all focused on that monkly order. And it is about people who have given up the regular day-to-day sansara and regular day-to-day professions or earning for a living. It is meant for those people. But rest of it, if you see, they don't have much, which is why in all documented literature that you have on practicing, even in Buddhist kingdoms, how the Buddhist society actually operated, you'll find it's not very different from Hinduism, because Buddhism has left a vacuum there on day-to-day living for householders. There is not much in terms of that aspect. And then, like I said, the whole technology in that era also was practically similar. So the Buddhist kingdom and the Hindu kingdom had a very similar technology layer operating. So day-to-day livelihoods were still operating on that same technology. So even in a Buddhist society, the son of weaver, there's a very good chance of that he'll still pick up his like father's profession only. So it was, I don't think, at least from my own reading, I have not seen any evidence of a Varnashrama sort of a model getting disrupted in a Buddhist society outside of the monkly order, because it was just impossible on like that sort of a technology stack. I think it is now easy to talk about it because it is seen as spiritual. It's not an like a atheist religion the way atheism is used in the Western philosophy. It is not a materialistic religion. There is some construct of spirituality in it, some construct of transcendent in it, although it is different from let's say Vedic Hinduism. So some people who don't want to be hardcore atheists or hardcore materialists, they see some answers in Buddhism. But if you take that Buddhism seriously, that is also incompatible with capitalism or consumerism that it operates today. So it is not. I think it's just used in a way just to say it was equal. They didn't have a caste system. Anybody could become a monk. That kind of a model. But the practical reality of Buddhist systems were different, and in fact, there's a lot of literature that came in the past few years where people are saying Buddha himself has spoken about castes or jati kind of lineages in so many places. And Buddhist literature itself says that the next Buddha will only come from so and so jati. So they also have that as well. It is not like it's a fully some casteless utopia or some egalitarian sort of a model. But it does leave some areas open for politics. So some people can take a line here, take a line there, and try to portray it as some opposite religion for Hinduism with no overlap at all. And in that process, they also try to say that it existed before Hinduism. But I think the traditional understanding of Hindu discourse is one, they say Hindu is Anadi, which is a totally like a timeless, eternal, and they don't even put a date. But Buddha himself picked up so much from Hinduism. So this whole, it's an absurd argument to say that Buddhism predates Hinduism. So I think it's just politics. People just play around just so that I think it gives a way to say that if I am asking you to step out of Hinduism and you don't want to become a Christian, you don't want to become a Muslim, but you still want to be religious, they need something, and that something they just want to throw Hinduism. Sorry, they want to throw Buddhism, saying that is an alternative. But if you look at people who actually take that and practice, I don't think they'll be like they'll also be stuck with the same kind of questions. So, like they in fact, in Tibet, for example, Tibetan Buddhists who are today facing a lot of confrontation from Chinese sort of the geopolitics there. They have all the same problems that Hinduism today has here. They complain of say modernity, and so Tibetan Buddhists say our rivers are getting destroyed with these huge dams that China is building for geopolitics and that kind of a thing. They say that our traditional education model is getting disrupted, our traditional continuities are getting disrupted, our language is getting disrupted. So it's the same concerns that a Tibetan Buddhist also have, but none of these concerns appeal to this average Marxist rationalist person who is using Buddhism against Hinduism today. He is just using it for his own ulterior motive. But I don't think Buddhism, in fact, Buddhism's interaction with modernity, if you take a proper Buddhist society, they will also have the same kind of challenges.
So, from our limited conversations today, in fact, this is the beginning of many conversations that we are going to have in future. So, the conclusion is that we need to have a relook at our history from our own point of view, not the Western point of view, and we have to have a look at our own society also from our point of view. And Buddhism, the society has to be studied based on Buddhist literature, also Jataka Kathalu, which has a lot of society those times. So it is nice speaking to a young person who has got such a vast knowledge and such a deep thought with a look towards future. I'm very much happy, and it feels wonderful to have someone like you. And so for the time being, we'll wind up the show, and it is thank you for sparing some time and speaking with us. So I thank you very much, and be ready in future.
Yeah, definitely.
More sincere and serious thought.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thanks
very
for the
much.
opportunity also. That the fact that you thought I'll add value to your channel, I'm like thanks for that. And I think if I have to summarize the whole conversation in one line, also I think my whole intent is that we need to come out of this hate, guilt, and shame that we have about our past and about our traditions. So my overall journey and endeavor has been in trying to answer those to myself. That whole guilt and shame that I have been filled with about my own past and my own culture, my own tradition. I want to come out of it because I see so much value there and so much value for the contemporary life also. It is not that it's only like useful for our ancestors. I see so much value of our tradition for our own life now and also solutions for the future as well. So I think that has been my endeavor, and yeah, I look forward to more and more conversations with someone like you on this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Namaste.
चल